2023. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Lancy.
Here.
Beck. Here. Pieper.
Here.
Chanzit. Sofa.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Barron.
Here.
Lehman. Ayazi.
Here.
Malay. Ewer.
Here.
Saron.
Here.
Vogelsinger.
I did get a message from Sarah that she will probably be late for tonight's meeting. Okay, second is a reminder to please speak directly into the microphone for BATV broadcast and recording. Item 3 would be items to be removed, added, or changed. Do we have anything?
No.
Alderman Lehman is here. Okay. Item number 4, matters from the public for items not on the agenda. I don't think there are any. Okay, we'll move right on into our discussion on the 2024 budget. And Peggy is here to answer every question that we have. Mark already asked 75% of the questions, so we got all those answers. I don't know if everybody got a chance to read those yet, but I always joke that it's great because I can go through and pick out probably 2 or 3 things that I would have asked about if Mark hadn't already sent them in. So I think he plans out of the business trip every time so we can use the downtime to read the budget while he's flying.
There you go. And
at an airport.
Thank you. And thanks, Peggy, for all the answers and everybody that contributed the answers. And apologies for repeating some of the questions. I didn't realize I was repeating questions until you came back with the answers.
No worries at all.
The singers here. Okay. So do you want to start in with?
Laura, I didn't know if you had any
Yeah.
opening comments.
I don't have any initial comments. I'll comment after.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming tonight to talk about the 2024 budget. I am sitting down rather than standing today because I found out yesterday I have a broken foot. So I apologize for that. We will get started with, last year was the first year that we did no PowerPoint presentation. We just went into the budget and I walked you through the areas that you should concentrate on and look at. This link can be found on the city's website. Right now it's on the news page, and it's also on our transparency page and on the finance page. So there are multiple ways to access the budget for anybody that is viewing online and would like to know how to see the budget. There is an introductory section. It has a transmittal letter from Laura. And then in this section, there are also our organizational chart, demographics on the city of Batavia, our financial policies, our budgetary process, and our fund organization. I don't know why they like to make the little toggle bar so thin.
Tiny.
Makes it hard, but you can also use, if you have a wheel on your mouse, if you can't get the toggle bar, you can use your wheel to go up and down to get to what you would look at. Something that is nice to look at on this page is the budget structure. This tells you how it's organized and represents the general fund, our special revenue and debt service funds, capital, and then our utilities. Our financial statements are also presented like this. For the general fund, that's the main operating fund of the city. It pays for the day-to-day operations and funds police, fire, streets, engineering, public properties, and all of administration. You can see here that under governmental funds, there's also special revenue, which is our motor fuel tax, debt service, and that's debt service just on the general fund debt. Debt for the utilities is budgeted in the utilities. And then capital is capital that's funded through general fund dollars. And utilities have their own capital section. And then under business type funds, it's electric, water, and sewer for the utilities, And then we have internal service funds, which are for our health insurance and our workers' comp insurance. And the general fund and the utility funds contribute to those self-insurance funds as well as the city. I'm going to skip over the budget overview for the moment, but this is where the question and answers are that we were referring to earlier. Any of the questions that the city council asks or any member of the public will be posted here once the answers are available. And we did have 2 sets of questions and answers. I guess I will show you that the questions and answers are very long. So there are a lot of things to go through there. I do recommend that everybody go through and read that when you are able to this week. So the rest of the budget is set up in fund summaries, funding sources, and then departments, capital, and debt. The fund summaries provide a lot of information, and the department budgets offer very detailed information for each department. Whenever you see an arrow, it means there's more information to follow. So you can see here, to get over to debt, you have to hit the arrow. So for funding summaries, we'll get into the budget itself. We start out with all funds. We don't spend money this way. Our financial statements do have a government-wide financial statement, but each individual fund rolls up into that. So each individual fund has its own revenues, expenses, and fund balance. Overall fund balance is listed here under all funds, but it can't be spent across funds. So this is just to give you an idea of what overall spending at the city is and what the overall fund balance is. But it's important that you look at each of the individual funds. So the revenues are broken out. We have 136.9 million in revenues budgeted and 157.1 million in spending. This shows you our ending fund balance is projected to be 67 million at the end of 2023, but then drawn down to 47 million at the end of 2024. Then there's some charts, further charts on revenues and expenditures. You can see what the total general fund budget is, special revenue, and you can see it compared to the projected spending and what the budget was originally. And this incorporates all of those categories that I was talking about that are included: general fund, special revenue, the debt and capital, and the utilities. When you see charts in the budget, you can click on, if you see a little icon there, you can change the type of chart that you see. Some people like to see pie charts, some people like bar charts. I like bar charts. But you can change them on any of the charts you see in here if there is the little icon down there. If this happens to be collapsed for some reason, if it says spreadsheet breakdown, that means there is data there for you to look at. So we will get into the general fund budget because that is the main operating budget of the city. There are explanations for people that are new to the budget on what the different funds mean in each category, and a summary of the last 2 years, the projected year and the budgeted year. These are in all of the fund budgets and department budgets. So for the general fund, we have 35.6 million in revenues budgeted and 37.9 in spending. our fund balance has increased to quite a good number. There's a couple of factors that impact that. I think I might have, I mentioned it somewhere in here. I might need to scroll down further to get to it, but we received the CARES Act funding initially with COVID, and then we also have the ARPA funds. They are not recorded here in this fund balance, but what that did was allow us to not have to transfer funds from the general fund. So in a backwards way, it increases the fund balance. And then we also had quite a few increases in other general fund revenues. There's some information here on that you can read through. But again, it just talks about our largest source of revenue is the sales tax at 32, almost 33%, followed by property tax. For our property tax, we have not been increasing our rate. We've been keeping it steady at around 73, between 73 and 74 cents. And we've only increased the dollar amount by the increase in new property. So we were capturing the new EAV, keeping the same tax rate. This breaks out, you can see how much our funding is for police and fire pension. It doesn't show in 21 and 22. I don't know if that's a ClearGov thing. It was in there, but I'm not sure if they aren't showing the actual years. It's likely that because they're pulling it from a different area. But you can see there was quite a big jump in our police pension funding for recommendation for 2024 from 2.7 million to 3.1 million. Fire stayed the same. At some point in here, I also mentioned what the funding levels are for those. Fire, I think, is around 78, but police is only around 55. I'm not sure if it's here or it's probably in the expenditure section. And then our sales tax. The state of Illinois passed the level the playing field sales tax, which collects sales tax from internet sales. That really boosted our sales tax receipts here at Batavia. But there's been some, I think, unsure on the retailer's part if they had to pay home rule tax. So our home rule tax has not increased at the same level as the municipal share. And it's possible that they don't have to pay the home rule tax. I think they're still trying to figure that out. They have a formula on how it's being handled. So in the budget for retail sales tax, our normal municipal share, I budgeted a 3% increase in revenue, but not a very large increase in our home rule sales tax because 2023 is projected to be about the same as 2022. One other large item is income tax. We had a big boost in income tax. In 2021, it was only 3.5 million, and it's projected to be 4.2 million in 2024. Some of our other revenues that support the general fund, the waste transfer station, telecom tax has been steadily decreasing. It used to be much, much higher than even in 2021. Cell phone plans are changing. I don't know, mine hasn't gone down. I don't know how other people are getting theirs to go down, but somehow they must be finding cheaper ways to pay their phone costs. And the same with the right-of-way franchise fees. This is for cable services, and that has seen a decrease as people are dropping their cable plans and using streaming plans. We do not capture the right-of-way franchise fees on streaming. There have been, I believe, a couple of lawsuits on that, and some cities, I think maybe Chicago, I don't know if you recall, Laura, on that, where they're trying to capture that revenue.
Yes.
But right now, we are not. So that revenue line has decreased. The payment in lieu of taxes, someone might see that and not know what that means. We have a couple of properties in the city that are tax exempt, but as part of their agreement, when they came to Batavia, they agreed to make a payment to the city in lieu of property taxes. It's River Rain and the Vanguard Academy. Both pay a nominal fee for city services because they recognize that there is a value to the city services, and they agreed to contribute. But the bulk of this number is payment from the electric utility. It is a payment that it's been in place for years, but it's to, a city could charge that if it was ComEd. So we are allowed to do that to our utility as well. This is not directly charged to the ratepayers. And then we have fees and services, not much change there. I think one of the questions that came to us was why were reimbursements and other revenues so high this in 2024? And that is because we have a reimbursement to the city from TIF 1. Back in 2016, the city authorized the general fund to transfer money to TIF 1 to supplement the cost of Houston Street. There had been several TIF projects all at once, and the TIF was out of money, but we knew that there would be future tax revenues coming in to offset that spending that we were making at that time. As part of the resolution, rather than go back and forth transferring money, we said we would wait until the end of the TIF before repaying the city. And if the TIF needed those fees or funds for a project, that was okay. But it turns out that as we get to the end of TIF 1 next year, there should be funds available. And so the plan is to transfer those monies back to the city. And that shows as an expenditure line in TIF 1 and a revenue line in the general fund. Then we have more charts which show you the expenditures by function. The police department showing is the largest percentage of our general fund budget, followed by public works and fire. This negative expense here is the charge to the utilities for general fund services. The utilities don't have an HR department or finance department, engineering, public works administration. Those costs are paid by the general fund, but the utilities share in those costs because they receive benefit from it. So a calculation is done each year to determine what that should be, and its accounting requires that it be a negative expense because otherwise we would be overstating expenses in the general fund. And this is just a summary of what the chart above was, where it shows the budget for each department. For administration, we put administration and legislative, which is Laura's department, HR, finance, utility billing, and IT under that label. Otherwise, the charts would have very small line items for those departments. So they're just collapsed there for presentation purposes, but you can find detailed departmental budgets under the caption up here under departments. And then there is some discussion here on what salaries were. This is a presentation by object class is what it's referred to, but basically it tells you what category of spending: salary and wages, benefits, supplies, contractual services, and capital. This other expense is that negative expense for the utility cost or share of the cost. And then interfund transfers are transfers to either debt service or a capital fund.
Peggy, on this chart also illustrative is that the salary and wages and benefit costs are about 75% of the overall expense objects for the departments.
That's correct. This column here where it shows the percent change, it is comparing to the projected line item, just to clarify that. Because the projected spending could end up being very different than what the original budget was. And then fund balance, there's a discussion here of what our fund balance is and mention of the CARES Act funding and the ARPA funding. We received nearly $5 million in those funds. And it's projected that we'll still have 18.5 million even after the drawdown of reserves in 2024 because of that boost in revenues and the other funding. One thing I should mention too on the interfund transfers, you can see that's quite a bit higher, 5.3 compared to 3.4 in 2023. We had an increase. We've been stepping up funding to the Street Capital Fund, adding $200,000 each year to get up to a level where we are able to keep up with the street resurfacing that we need to do. And then it also added $300,000 for the bike ped plan implementation. And then the other increase in the transfer was $1,300,000 higher than last year for transfer to the building capital fund because of the new roof that is needed on City Hall. And so it's very good that we have those reserves so that we don't have to borrow money to fix the roof. We can just use money that the city has in its reserves to make that happen. And then under special revenue, it's motor fuel tax. Motor fuel tax is called a special revenue fund because the state of Illinois puts restrictions on how that money can be spent. They have to approve all of the road plans and approve the spending. I know Rahat enjoys doing that, right, Rahat? They can be very particular. And so the street program, the resurfacing program, has been a part of this budget for a number of years, including the crack fill program. But those funds are going to be down to $500,000 at the end of 2024. As you can see, we've been drawing down that fund. The revenues, the annual revenues, are about $1 million. We do get the normal, our share of the normal motor fuel tax, and then a couple of years ago, the governor he doubled the motor fuel tax, and they agreed to share some of that funding with cities, but not at the same level that they share the original motor fuel tax. So we didn't get double, but we did get a bump in the funds we receive. And then also Rebuild Illinois funds. The state issued $1.5 billion in debt, and they distributed that to county, cities, and road districts. Our share of that was $1.7 million. The only restrictions on that is that we follow IDOT rules for spending and that we spend it by July of 2025. We've paid for preliminary engineering for the second half of Main Street, and there's money set aside for design for next year for Main Street. And then because the funds have to be spent by 2025, we are utilizing the balance of those funds for the Prairie and Wilson Street intersection, which came in much higher than we had wanted it to. But now that was the estimate, Rahat. We still haven't got the final numbers, right?
The bid is opening on Friday.
Yeah.
So we have a bid opening on Friday. Let's keep our fingers crossed that it's less than what
Yes,
the
let's
engineer's
hope.
estimate is here. Okay. And then when you're scrolling through this, if you just click on the down arrow, it'll collapse it back up so that you don't have to scroll all the way down. Debt service just has our debt payments for the fire station, the 2017 bond debt for storm work and for the windows here at City Hall, and then the Donovan Bridge. Next year with the tax levy will be the last levy that we have for the Donovan Bridge, and then those bonds will be paid. We were very fortunate that we got a lot of federal funding and state grants to redo the Wilson Street Bridge, or the Donovan Bridge as it is officially titled. So we only had to borrow $2.5 million for that, which was very good. We were fortunate on that. And then the final levy on that again is next year. The fire stations are not funded by property tax. They're funded by the home rule sales tax that was passed originally in 2006. Whoops. And those will be paid for not next year, but with the 2025 budget, because the final payment is January 1 of 2026. And then the 2017 bonds were 20-year bonds. And then our capital projects funds. There is a lot of information here. We have drainage, street, building, public works, and fire capital projects funds that are all funded from general fund revenues. The main item in the drainage fund is the Carriage Crest project. It was budgeted this year, but then they had to do more work to try and bring the cost down on that. As you can see, there's also a lot of drainage maintenance projects listed. But as you can see here, there is now $5.5 million budgeted, 5.9 when you include the construction engineering for Carriage Crest. And that is offset by revenues of, we're using the balance of ARPA funds, which are 2.8 million, and then 3 million in bond issue. Street improvement capital, the main item there is, one of the questions for that we had come in was what are the projects for the bike pedestrian plan? Those weren't listed, so those were just added this afternoon. I added them here and in the question and answer section, so you can see what projects were called out for 2024. And then this just shows the revenues. We have Safe Routes to School grant for next year, pass-through funding for the Prairie and Wilson Street intersection, a small construction engineering grant for Prairie and Wilson Street. This is a transfer from the general fund showing the 1.2 million level for street funding and 300,000 for the pedestrian plan. And then the Safe Routes to School project. And we have this top item is a summary of this line item. And then the items in italics are the sub-line items that add up to, in this case, 917,000 for street maintenance projects. And then for infrastructure construction, it is mainly the Prairie and Wilson Street intersection. We have the total budgeted here, and then the TIF contribution, the Rebuild Illinois funds, and then the other projects we have are related to road work required for the wastewater treatment plant project over on Union, and well, Water Street and Union. The Building Capital Fund, there are quite a few projects here, but the bulk of the cost is related to the roof. You can see here at 1.1, almost 1.2 million of the 3.2 million. Vehicles have been difficult to get. If you read through the Public Works capital and the fire capital, you'll see that there's been delays in receipt of those vehicles. Accounting requires that we pay for them in the year they're received. So once they get here, you'll see they've been ordered, but you won't see that expenditure until it actually comes in. Next year, there's the plan to order the ladder truck replacement, which is estimated to be now $2 million. But that actual payout of cash will not occur for at least probably 3 years.
You hope.
Well, let me see here what, we've been increasing the transfer a little bit for fire too, because we knew that the cost would probably be higher. So right now there is still a projected fund balance next year of 2.2 million for the fire apparatus. And that includes expecting to pay for the engine that was ordered 2 years ago. So I'll come back to the TIF funds. We don't need to go over the internal service funds. The electric utility is our largest utility budget. And one thing I would point out is that our reserves are going from 17.4 million down to 11 million because the extensive capital projects that they have planned. In addition, our revenues have decreased. We saw a little bit of a decrease in our residential revenue. It wasn't a very hot summer. I mean, you may remember a hot day here or there, but it wasn't over an extended period, so people weren't using their air conditioning like they may in a hotter weather. And also, I think that more and more residential homes are incorporating ways, they're buying newer appliances that are more energy efficient and LED lights, which makes a big difference in the electric bill. So we have seen the revenues go down for that. In addition, our largest user installed solar, so their consumption has been lower. This just breaks it out by department for electric capital, metering, transmission, and distribution. And then here you can see what the bonds are. The electric utility issued bonds back in 2006 to fund the construction of our two 138 kV substations and the transmission lines over that you see at Fermilab and through the city, some transmission lines to accommodate the 138 kV. And so we are just at the summary level here, but on each fund summary, you will see the information on fund balance for each fund. The water utility has had a lot of capital projects as well, but they've been using debt to finance those capital projects, IEPA loans. In 2020, there was a bond issue to fund some water main replacements. The revenues in this utility are not that high. Let me get down to a breakdown So you can see what the revenues are, because they look higher than they are there, because we see in this year we had the grant for the lead service line replacements. We were very fortunate that we received $4 million that we don't have to pay back. Now for round 2 of the lead service lines, we did not receive a grant for that, but we are able to get a low interest loan. And so the revenues themselves for residential water and commercial, you can see, are not that much. 3.7 for residential and 1.5 for commercial. Just to replace one water main is over $1 million often for the section of water main. So it's very capital intensive and takes quite a bit of time to recapture the cost of replacing a water main, but they last many, many years. So that's the upside, but the downside is that we've had to increase water rates over the last several years, actually. Incrementally, we've been trying to keep up with that so that we don't have to make a large increase all at once. And this budget does include a projected 3% increase in water revenues. Also includes an 8% increase in sewer rates, and Gary will be bringing that ordinance next Tuesday for discussion by the council.
Worthy to point out that the electric utility is not proposing any increase, and the last increase that there was to rates for the electric utility was back in 2015.
Yes. Thank you, Laura, for pointing that out. I meant to talk about that when I was mentioning the drawdown of fund balance. But to be able to go that long without implementing a rate increase is, I mean, for our costs have gone up, certainly, because there's cost of living increase for the wages for our linemen and the cost of transformers.
Yeah.
Very expensive now. So those are increasing, but we are definitely not way out of line with our rates for the electric utility. We are definitely in line with St. Charles, Naperville. Geneva is still lower. I don't know how they do it, but they're not way lower. They're just slightly lower. So we can feel good about that. If you have constituents that come to you and say, oh, your electric utility is so expensive, you can say, well, our rates are in line with the surrounding communities.
It used to be true, and it's not true anymore.
It's not true any
We're very
longer.
competitive.
Right. For a number of years before Prairie State was implemented, our electric utility had lower costs than ComEd. And then with fracking and everything that's happened over the years, the cost for electricity went way down. But now it's coming around, and the cost for electricity, I happen to be a ComEd customer because I'm just outside the city, but now my costs are higher than the city's utility costs for electric.
Excuse me, Geneva, just now you'd say we're still a little higher than Geneva. They had announced a rate increase, didn't they?
They did.
Or is that
St.
just
Charles
future?
is a little bit lower than us, but Geneva, yes.
No,
Geneva
it's
just-
the opposite. St. Charles is actually higher than us.
Okay.
And then
Geneva is the one
is
that-
a little bit lower, but they are increasing their rates. I think they have some stepped up rates. It might be a couple of years that they're implementing rate increases. Gary, do you recall what the last rate comparison showed?
You're right. St. Charles was a little higher than us. Geneva was a little lower. Geneva has the new industrial park on the east side of their town. That's why it's going to drive their rate increases.
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to, when we get to that point, we need to start thinking about how to incrementally go to where we think we're going to need to be in 5 years, or what we see the other rates doing in the state. I think we need to start to figure out where we should do that, because I'd rather see us do it very slowly than, you know, a big increase. I mean, we've done that with the water utility and the wastewater sewer
Right.
rates. I think that's something we need to plan for and start to do so that we can try to forecast where we're going to be in 5 years for the
Right.
rates.
It's a balance of making sure, because it's very important that we make sure that we have reliable utilities. So if we have areas where we have a lot of outages or things like that, we want to make sure that we're making the investment in the infrastructure to make sure that it is reliable. They always get it back on very quickly, but if there's areas that need to be repaired, we want to make sure that we're doing that. But I agree, we should be looking at incremental increases for the electric utility. And we'll be looking at that in 2024 for 2025.
Peggy, can I ask you a question as long as we're talking about rates? Our municipal rate that goes on everybody's property tax bill, I believe last year was 73 cents.
That's correct.
And is it going to stay, you think, at that?
I can jump over here to funding sources and show the history of the rate and what the projected tax levy will be. I have the tax levy coming to the cow next Tuesday. This is what I'll be requesting that we levy. It shows a $1 increase, but it will not increase the rate. In fact, I believe it will make the rate just under 73 cents.
Let me share this with the city council. You get around city managers and finance directors and good ones like Peggy, and they all sit there and watch what everybody's municipal rates are. And it used to be, before we had Peggy, our rate was pretty good. It was up there. But then a lot of things happened, and we got sales tax, and we got Randall Road developed, and we got the big spurt in the industrial park. So a lot of nice things happened. But I was just recently at a meeting, and I'm not going to say who it was. There was 5 mayors there from the region. And one mayor says to me, "You really have stuck it to me." And I said, "Oh, I have?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "You know, your town touches my town, and some of the neighbors get out their tax bills, and they go in the backyard and talk to their neighbors. And the guy walking in there with the Batavia bill says, 'Here's my city tax rate, it's 73 cents. And the guy on the other side of the fence says, "Well, here's my city tax rate, and it's $2.11. And then that was probably somebody to the south that had that conversation. But then if you go north, was it St. Charles, 90 cents now maybe?
I think it's around that, yes.
Yeah. And Geneva is 80 something?
No, they are lower than us.
They are?
Right, they're a non-home rule community, so they are under the property tax cap. I know that they would like to increase their levy, but
Yeah, I hear
it's
that from
capped.
Mayor Burns all the time about how he wants to have a referendum, but they're telling him don't do it and all this other stuff. So anyway, I just say that for the council's benefit to let everybody realize under your direction and leadership on this budget thing, how well this has turned out for Batavia in the last few years. I mean, we're the envy of a lot of cities, and I'm not trying to sit here and brag, but I'm just saying to the credit of those in your department and Laura, who's running this show, how we've kept that number really good in comparison to others. And I mean, I'm not going to get into names, but there's some other cities that are, you know, the 211 that's south of us, there's some that are a lot more than that in the area. So, I mean, we really, our taxpayers, I think, really don't have a lot of room to complain about the property taxes when it comes to the city. Now, some of the other governments really lay it on them, and that brings the tax bill up, but they aren't going to get it because the city of Batavia did it to them.
That's correct. We are part of the overall taxing bodies for Batavia, but this chart here that we have shows of every dollar bill that for property tax that's paid, the city receives 8 cents, and you can see the largest one is obviously the school because they don't have other revenues to supplement their costs. So they are receive 68 cents of every tax dollar.
You know, as I sit here and think about it, when I got elected mayor in 1981, the city's tax rate at that time was $1.05. And now we're down to 70 cents, or going to be, or pretty close to it.
Yes,
So we.
73, I would round it.
But I mean, so we're well past 30 cents that we've got a tax rate decrease.
Yes, so.
Thanks to you. Appreciate it very much.
Well, not just thanks to me, thanks to all of our revenue sources that allow us to keep that down. But thank you very much, Mayor. And that is something that we definitely keep in mind when we're discussing the budget and spending, is we understand there's an overall tax burden. You know, those that live here and shop here are paying our sales tax and paying utility taxes and property taxes, and then paying the utility costs. So we want to make sure that we keep all of those factors in mind when we're doing the budget. To finish up on the fund budgets, for the fund summaries, we have the wastewater. This is definitely one of the largest costs that we will see, hopefully, for many, many years, the rehabilitation of the wastewater treatment plant. When this project originally started, it was not at the scope it is now, unfortunately, with inflation and all of several other factors, mandates by the state for phosphorus and other items. This project is now probably 140 million when you add in phase 3, which includes expansion. But the second phase, which we started construction on right now, is probably around 46 to 47 million when you add in the engineering costs to the construction contract. We received a $38 million low-interest loan from the IEPA. We asked for more. They said, sorry, Charlie. We really would have liked that because the interest rate is so low. It's only 1.15%. So that is fantastic. It's very good, especially in this environment. But we will have to issue bonds to pay for the balance of the cost for that project. We're going to use the IEPA funds first. And so we're hoping that by the time we have to issue bonds, that the interest rate cost for bonds will be lower than what it is today. Because of inflation, the interest rates on debt issuance is higher than it has been for many, many years. Then I'm just going to skip over to departments and show you how to access the different budgets. We won't go over all of these in detail, or we would be here very late. I would encourage all of you to look through these budgets by department. Each department head or members of their staff have written a narrative about items they've accomplished this year and what they have planned for 2024. So I would encourage you to read through all of that and look. This is where you would find the detailed spending for each department. And again, the items that you see in italics are sublines of the main account number. And then I would just recommend that. Oh, here, sorry. I'm like, why don't I see the police department? I forgot how I grouped them when I set this up. So then we have administrative departments, and then public works with administration, engineering, public properties and streets, and then public safety are our police and fire budgets. I'll bring up the police department budget just to show you that they have and discuss their request for 2 additional police officers. They talk about it in the narrative on why it's needed. And they also are requesting a comfort dog be added to the department, which I think is a great idea. I hope you do too. But you can find the details of their line items here. Other items they have that are unusual. They're replacing all of their tasers in 2024. A space study for analyzing whether or not they should have a new standalone police department. That will be something that will be very important to get the results for. We're anticipating that they will say that they need a standalone facility just because things have changed since they originally moved into this building in the 80s. And a modern facility is likely something that we will recommend that they do.
What are we expecting to do with the space that's left? Do we know?
We have a great deal of space needs. We are right now giving up conference rooms and dividing them in order to find space for people to work with, which leaves us with a deficit of meeting space, but we're just kind of trying to adapt. We could really use that space for additional office space here.
However, there probably still will be some space, and that'll be something that we'll have to discuss on how it could be best utilized. Mm-hmm. One step at a time, but it is a great question.
Yes.
Public storage.
Yeah.
Joke.
Not public storage, however.
Adding some levity.
I think there's other entities in town that we could lease that to, whether it be
Yes.
like the township, other offices that space would be usable for, where it would not just be used, but it would also be a revenue source.
Right.
For maintenance for the building even.
Ideally, it would be a tax exempt entity because if it were a non-tax exempt entity, it might cause us issues with our tax exemption for property tax.
That's why I mentioned the other public entities in town. That space might be usable for.
Yes. So those are the main items in here. And there are CIP sheets on all of the capital projects. Let me make sure I was done with. But do go back and look at each of the departments for the utilities as well. Electric capital, you'll get to see all of the projects, and there are many of them, as you see, I scroll down here, that are planned for 2024. So please do go through and look at each individual department to review the detail of the capital items and any other items. And I should have mentioned under IT, there was a request to add another position in the IT department. Howard Chasen, the IT director, has said that he is bringing a memo next week to talk about that with the city council to the COW meeting on the 14th. And then the capital improvements plan. You can look at it as the one-year plan is what you're approving if you approve the budget. The out years you are not approving. Those are just in there for informational and planning purposes so that you can see what's on the horizon, what needs to be done. But this gives you what the total projects budgeted for just 2024 that are included in this budget that you're approving. This says 47 million. The capital items in total are 56 million. That's because there are certain line items that are capital that don't lend themselves to a CIP because it's for unknown projects for TIF, or it's for supplies needed for the electric utility that aren't necessarily for a specific project. And then here is where you would see from 2024 to 2028, it totals almost 150 million. So there are many capital projects here. To see a specific one, like the new police station that we were talking about, you just click on the project And then you can see a description of the project, the years that the spending is planned. And because we haven't had the space study done for this, this is just a guesstimate. We don't know what that would be or what the cost would be. I believe the chief used other police stations that were recently constructed to come up with that number that's in here. And then it also shows you the funding source. This would be debt issuance. And then I find it easier to use the back button rather than to click somewhere else, but that's just a little navigation tip. And then lastly, we have an overview of the city's debt as it is right now. This shows what the balance will be at the end of this budget year. The general fund does not have a lot of debt. So we will be adding to that in 2024. I didn't include projected debt because I don't know the amount of the debt issue for Carriage Crest, but that will be added into the general fund debt for Carriage Crest. And then the electric utility, this 15.6 million is for the 138 kV mentioned. Water, this balance does not include the closeout of the water treatment plant IEPA loan. That will be roughly $5 million that will be added for water. And then they also will be borrowing for the second phase of the lead service line replacement, and that is 2.1 million. So water will be adding a little over 7 million for debt. And then sewer, this does not include the phase 2 at all. And that will add, as I mentioned, probably 47 million to that number. So that one is a staggering number, but luckily the interest is low that we're paying on it. The IEPA actually is passing legislation to allow cities to extend to 30 years for lower annual payments, but it really adds a lot to the interest cost to add that extra 10 years. So
something that I'll mention just because Peggy won't mention it, but over the years, she's refinanced or found opportunities to refinance bonds that have dropped the rates and saved us millions on the debt that we've had. Not that it's going to happen now because
Yes.
That's the opposite way the market is, but while it was low, there was a lot of those that got refinanced when we had the opportunity to do that have saved the city millions of dollars in debt payments.
yes, in fact, we're probably one of the only cities in Illinois that refinanced an IEPA loan back in 2013 because the interest rate on bonds at that time were actually lower than the IEPA rate, which was unheard of.
Yeah.
And in fact, those bonds will be paid off next year. So following this is just a breakout of each debt issue. If it says debt service, that means it's general fund debt. Otherwise, it will list the utility that the debt was issued for. So these are bonds, and then that is followed by the IEPA loans for water and sewer. And that is all I have for you. Oh, except the overview you can look through. There isn't a lot there because I didn't want to be repetitive in the information that's provided. The charts and summaries with my comments throughout should provide the answers to the information, but this is just a synopsis of are there any rate increases, what's the revenues and expenditures in the surplus or deficit for each fund. And then, as I already mentioned, if there's further, the strategic plan will be added once it's passed by the council. I'm assuming that will be after the budget passes,
Yes.
but we can add it at any time. Mm-hmm. And then any further question and answers, not ones we covered tonight because we're not documenting it. unless you ask me to put something specifically in there, people can watch this recording and hear those questions as we go through. So I'll turn it back to you, Alderman Wolf. And
Well, I have to say, I for the past few years, I've just had somebody else, typically my wife, just pull up the website, try to find something. I'll rattle off like the general fund, what the changes are between the years, and give her a couple minutes to find it. And every year it's gotten easier. So I have to say that, just not from our perspective, but I think from the general public's perspective, everything that we've done to try to be as open and as transparent as we can about the budget process, about the budget itself, and getting that information out there has gotten better and better every year. So thank you again. I guess I'll just open it up, and if anybody has any questions that haven't been asked and answered already. Nick?
Question, I'll repeat what everyone's saying. You're probably getting tired of it, but wow, this is, and it does over the last 10 years, every year. It's like some of those numbers, I could draw a graph of how well the budget is laid out and then presentable. It keeps getting better and better. So, and the colors, no, she likes the line chart more than the pie chart.
that's right.
Yeah, I was listening. The colors in the graphs really draw me away from the parentheses and the negative numbers, so that's kind of a good thing too. No, just a quick question. There's general guidelines as to where our emergency fund should be. What are those?
Yes, I do discuss it in here. It might be in the overview. 60 days operating expenses is the minimum recommendation for a governmental fund. And then for the utility funds, it's 90 days. But if you will look at surrounding communities, generally it's much higher because they are planning for capital spending and other things. But the minimum is 60 days, and when we are well above that. I know there's been discussions in past budget years where we are projecting that it is going to go down, but I gave you the reasons why it's been increasing with the sales tax and the income tax, and the federal funds that we've received have caused it to increase. So we really should utilize those reserves.
If you look at it over the history, the reserves kind of just wave back and forth over the years. It's not like we drop way down and then build them way back up. They kind of bounce around almost, in a wave pattern throughout the years. And that's pretty much been the whole time I've been on the council, it's been that way. Because we've tried to not raise taxes and spend down what we have, which I think is to what typically everybody tries to do themselves.
Right, so a perfect use for that is capital spending, pay as we go. Somebody may say, well, why don't you just pay for Carriage Crest with that? I don't know that we would want to draw it down that much, would be my response. It makes sense for a project like that to be paid over time.
And I think, especially for the ratepayers, I think that makes more sense than to pay it all out of that and then turn around a year or two later, have to raise rates again because we have to do another capital project that we don't have money for in reserves.
Right. And so as you go into planning your capital projects or the strategic plan, which items you want to focus on, that'll be something that will be part of the discussion is what kind of resources are we going to need for this? Is this going to require new employees or a high cost of implementation or construction? So those will all be, I imagine, part of the discussion as you go through the strategic plan.
Does anybody online have any hands up?
No.
Okay.
No. I just wanted to make a comment overall about the budget, that a budget is a value proposition to our residents. And the staff certainly takes that very seriously. And as we approach each budget year, this is not a copy and paste exercise, and that departments spend many hours in many meetings with employees at all level in their organizations to go line item by line item and to scrutinize whether items need to remain the same, be increased or decrease. I also think that City of Batavia is very lucky, based on decisions that were made decades ago, as well as decisions that have been made very recently, which have provided our community with the opportunity to grow in ways that have provided us with the financial security to be able to continue to make grand plans. And that's something that you're going to see when we bring back the draft of the strategic action plan. And so I really feel very fortunate about, and I feel very good about the financial position that we're able to produce this budget, which does not increase the rate the taxpayers are paying for their property taxes, and really utilizes very little in terms of the reserves to fund things. Ordinarily, you wouldn't use reserves to fund things which would cover ongoing operating expenses. But in this case, I think it's so little of the reserves that's being utilized for that you'll see in the future when you capture the next wave of EAV increase that's coming, that will be able to cover those operating costs. And I too, Peggy, we all, work within our departments to provide you with the best detail we can and the best accuracy we can, but it really takes a tremendous effort on her part to weave all of that together and to tamp down this, to allow this to grow. Peggy really plays she's like the conductor of the orchestra when it comes to this thing. And she just really does a great job. And so I want to thank you very much. And thank you. Also about the system that we're using. It's very different than the system that was in place when I started. And changing systems is hard.
It is hard.
You had to do a tremendous amount of back work before we could even get into the system to put information in there. So I just want to acknowledge that. And we hear from staff that it's easier to use. All of you say that this is a much better format, and we hear from residents and even some, let's say, Facebook pages that are focused on their local government who have given compliments to the city that this makes it very transparent. So thank you very much.
And there's no big giant budget book anymore.
Right.
Right. We have moved away from paper really altogether. We can provide a printed copy to someone if they don't have access to a computer and need that. But we have not had any requests for paper copies.
Do we still keep, like what we've done in the past, do we still keep one here for somebody to come down and look at, or do we keep one at the library?
We do not keep one at the library.
They have terminals there, they can get online.
Access it at the library online. That's correct. Okay. But we do have a paper copy here should someone need to see one.
I had a list of questions. Not as many as Mark, don't worry. One is, I noticed the bag fee was listed under the general fund. I thought that was a dedicated fund or a dedicated pool.
It doesn't qualify as its own fund. We can restrict the use of the dollars without making it be a separate actual fund in the financial statements.
Okay, I was making sure in that. And are the numbers there, I know it's a projected number for this year, is that, what is that based off of?
Laura, could you extend the session? It needs to be done on your side. I tried over here and it would not work.
Yeah, because I think if we have that income come in as a revenue, and then where the line item is, where it would go back out, as long as we stay within those two, and then it's to what we said we were going to use it for, we're okay with that. And that's how we would restrict it.
Well, I actually would make a restriction, not in the budget document, but on our financial
Financials.
software. It would have, and you could see it in the monthly balance sheet report where it would show restricted cash on both sides, so you could see what the balance was of those funds. There has not been any dedication of the use of those funds that I'm aware of at this point yet, correct?
Right.
Okay. And you asked me what the projection was based on. It was based on what we've received so far this year.
Cutoff date? Does that include October or just?
Oh, the projection is through the end of the year based on what we've received so far.
So far.
We've extrapolated out what we'll get for 2023 and then use that to calculate 2024.
Which will be 5 months of income because the fees are paid the following month on the 25th.
Okay. Couple other ones here. I noticed, I was looking in the Public Works vehicle purchases section. There are these Excel sheets that are linked on here. They're not, the columns aren't labeled, so I have a few uncertainties there. I know for most of these, it lists a bunch that are Public Works shared. The biggest one I noticed being this hydro excavator as a good example. That's listed on all 3 or 4 like funds, so water utility, electric utility, Public Works.
That was purchased 2 years ago. Is
This
which,
is
what's, I'm,
one,
You should be able to share again, Peggy.
okay.
not just the hydro excavator, there's a few
Or do you need me
Public
to-
Works shared on here.
I'm sorry, what?
If you need some help sharing it, let me know. Okay.
I minimized it, so I'm not sure. Oh, here it is. I apologize. You cannot start screen sharing while the other participant is sharing.
Needed more steps today.
Do, 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 do. We'll get it.
Stop share. Okay.
Okay. I don't know why it's, now I need to go back to that. Here we go. And it was, I'll just choose that.
See, those are.
I think it says
Those are on my
each department
side.
uses the vehicle.
Yeah, I got that. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't being counted multiple times in each spreadsheet. I didn't think it was, but I wanted to
Yeah,
clarify.
the total cost gets split. So if it's
Yeah.
250,000, 175 might go to streets and 50 goes to water, and
Depends on who uses it and how much they use it. That's how they
that's how it gets
split out how they
Okay.
pay
So even
for
though
it.
the same vehicle is shown in 3 different categories,
Yeah.
streets, water, wastewater, if you add up all those numbers, that would be the cost of the vehicle.
That's what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure because.
And
it
yes,
wasn't-
that
That's how
vehicle
much they
is that
cost.
expensive.
I figured. I'm not.
I mean, we talked about it earlier. The mayor brought up, the $2 million truck and how long it's going to take us to get the new ladder truck. I think the original ladder truck cost us, what, $685? Or it was planned at $685 and it ended up being $1 million by the time we got it?
I think it was 820,000.
20.
Approximately.
Yeah, okay. I probably should have asked you this.
That was before my time, but I remember the
Yeah,
cost because that's what
It
we
is
based
amazing
it.
to me when you talk to the companies that do this. I met a friend of one of my daughters that works for one of the companies that builds the trucks, and they have supply issues to where they can have 10 trucks ready to go and they could put them together, but they're missing 3 pieces and they can't even put the bodies onto the trucks. So they're having to go out and rent warehouse space to store the bodies, to store the frames, to store parts of them until they wait till they can get the computer that sits on top of the engine so
Right.
that they can put it together. It's just absolutely insane right now.
Axles is a
Right,
huge
and
issue.
cities and municipalities coming to the company and saying, can we pay for it now? And then, if the increase comes back, it's only going to be on the part that they don't have now.
Yeah.
And what do? Do they sit on the money for 2 years till the truck's done? Or do they take partial payment? There's real questions on how they're going to handle that.
Many of the contract items for the electric utility contain a clause that because of the long lead times, if the price comes back higher when it's finally ready to be delivered, that the city will pay that difference.
On that note, also looking at those Excel sheets, I noticed that for the public works and electric and sewer and all those, the yearly estimates matched up with what was in the capital funds pages, but the water utility vehicle purchasing did not. It was different.
Jeremy Barkai, our water superintendent, is actually the water and sewer superintendent.
Okay.
He's split over water and sewer because he manages the sanitary sewer portion where Zach manages the wastewater treatment plant. And so the cost for his employees and all of the supplies are charged back proportionately to the sewer fund. So his vehicle, you'll see it in water and in sanitary sewer.
Oh, okay. Just making sure that was there. I was looking back through for the upcoming Main Street reconstruction. On the city website, it says that we're getting $2.3 million in federal STP funds, but I didn't see that on the capital improvement page. Is that still there?
The way the STP funds work is generally the city pays for design, and hopefully we receive a state grant for that, a portion of it. And then for the construction, the state actually issues the contract and bills us net of the STP funds.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we don't show revenue for any of the STP funds.
That's helpful. Thank you.
But the construction engineering is billed in full because we handle that contract. So if we have a grant for construction engineering, you will see revenue for that, but you will not see it for the construction itself. For Prairie and Wilson, it's net, and then also for Main Street.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. This is more just statements more than anything. For the public bathrooms on the west side here, people can use the city hall ones here, right?
I'm glad you brought that up because we didn't go over the TIF, and it is important that we do. I'm glad.
That's great
When you're
prompt.
finished, we'll go back
Because
and
there
talk
are more
about that.
projects than there is funding. So we need to determine which projects city council would like to pursue and which ones they don't, because we want to make sure that we make the best use of those funds in the last year of the TIF.
Right. So go ahead and finish your questions because we can talk about that at any point this evening. Let's just remember that we do want to talk about it before we leave.
Okay. I was going to say I'm also somewhat suspicious of the fountain, which will be part of that conversation. And really, that is about covered. I was also going to suggest, it doesn't have to be for this budget year, but in the future, could we also maybe implement, and I'm not sure if ClearGov will allow this, an inflow-outflow chart from funding sources to funds to end destinations, if you know what I'm talking about. Like one of these.
Basically, within each fund, we have our revenues and we have our expenditures. There actually is a mountain chart that I could use, but it would just be separated by revenue and expenditure. It would not let me combine them into one chart like that.
Okay. That was more of like.
I can ask if that's
clarity
something they
thing.
may add, or we could
helps me know
do
where
it
my
ourselves.
going
But
from.
ClearGov has been very receptive to Peggy's suggestions, and even from last year made changes to their software based on that. So
when we implemented this software, we didn't realize that they were new to a lot of the facets of what they were doing. And things have changed each year of the last 3 years since we implemented this. They've had major transformations, and they know who I am. We're on a first name basis.
I think the ClearGov site, it's can improve naturally, but I think it's already great. It's very human readable. It
Yes.
makes all this so much clearer than a giant PDF, and I've seen my share of those as well. One last question. Looking in the City Hall upgrades coming up, A good number of those are for the existing police station. And I'm wondering, that's going to be kind of awkward if we're also going to be building a new police station in just a couple of years. I'm sure that's been looked at, but just kind of bring attention to that a little bit. I mean, understandably, if they're necessary, that's,
Yeah.
even in the short term, that's fair.
Some of them are just like painting carpet, which would be useful to however it's being used as an office. But there are some jail improvements for the intercom.
Yeah.
That's an important thing. Yeah.
I don't know if the chief has any, is he over there? I can't see him.
Not yet.
That about covers
Do
it.
you
Thank
have
very
any
much.
comment on that? I'm assuming it's something that probably should not wait.
Yeah, if there's stuff in there, like for example, the intercom system, which has been deficient for the last several years, we're probably not in compliance with some of the regulations for jail facilities. So it's important for that type of stuff to get fixed. Other stuff that might be in there is maybe more furniture related stuff. I don't know if
Yeah, and that
anything
can-
specific.
Very good. I just wanted to, do due diligence there. Thank you very much.
I guess now if we're done with those, the TIF one was, where I had the question was, the 663 that's proposed to be the general fund repayment on the loan.
Yes.
Does that include spending the 750 for public restrooms?
Yes, I'll
So
bring up
that would
that
be the
budget
balance
for
left
you.
after the public restrooms.
There are a lot of items listed for TIF 1. And they are right here. So we've been paying for Main Street out of the TIF. We could shift that to TIF 3 because that still encompasses downtown. So there is still funding for that. The Park District rebate for the fountain, that's in TIF 1. And because it won't be in a TIF after the expiration of TIF 1, we can't shift that cost to another TIF. So if you want to continue that contribution, I guess it will depend on if the fountain is functioning. So I don't want to get ahead of myself there. But then this lists out all of the items that we have for TIF 1, a contribution towards the Prairie and Wilson Street intersection that is in TIF 1. And then riverbank stabilization behind, I believe it was the creamery. Is that what you said?
Sturdy shelter.
A sturdy shelter.
Yeah, sturdy shelter.
Ice cream or beer. I wasn't sure.
That was going to be one of my other questions too, is if we're going to repay the loan, which we already did, would we be better off to use some of that money for more stabilization along the riverbank out of the TIF to try to use all the benefit from the TIF within the TIF?
Either way.
I mean, either way,
Well, either way.
or next year it comes out of the general fund
Right,
after we
it's
pay
going
it
to come
back.
out of the general fund, and we increase the transfer from the general fund to the building capital to pay for the roof.
Roof, okay.
So if we left funds, actually, I would recommend that we don't leave them here, that we transfer them back, because there are areas of the river that need stabilization that aren't in the
Aren't in the
TIF.
TIF, okay.
So we wouldn't
That's
have to
fine.
worry about the restriction.
Right.
Right, any restriction.
Being in the TIF.
Okay.
So these are the items that, Laura, why don't you talk about the tin shop, the restrooms, and the fountain?
That sounds good.
Can I interrupt before we go? Sorry.
Yes.
Can I interrupt really quickly? Because I only have about 25 minutes because I do have something I have to go to. So yeah, I mean, in my questions and everything, I definitely have concerns about some of the TIF spending. So I know that's going to come up. The one thing before we go to TIF, and I know it's been in here before, it was in last year's budget, and it's the cameras. And I don't know if anybody else is with me on this. I'm kind of a no on those cameras. I think it's a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, or it maybe briefly existed, but if we don't have the personnel to like watch stuff real time, it's all going to be like post. Like if something happens, we're all going to be using that stuff in retrospect, and frankly, there's enough cameras on people's phones that we can use to gather stuff post-incident if we needed it. So I don't want to be a surveillance state. So that's the kind of the one big thing on the budget I'm a no on. And I guess I'd like to understand more as well on some of the, and I know Howard's going to bring that next week. Unfortunately, I'm actually on vacation next week, so I can't join next week's meeting. But we just added somebody, and now we're adding somebody else. So I'm trying to really understand those needs as well. So Howard, looking forward to a memo on that one. But then, yeah, so that was my biggest thing is on the cameras to remove that from the budget, and then the TIF stuff. My comments are in the questions, so nothing more to say on that.
Okay, thank you. I think it would be valuable to have a discussion on the cameras to see how the rest of the council feels about that.
Right. And I just wanted to reiterate the reasons why the surveillance was suggested. We had been looking at it for many years because of random acts of damage to our public art, and that we don't have any cameras on that. Also came up when we had River Street closed to be able to provide protection to large groups assembled there. And then recently, instances of graffiti around the bridge area that have happened. But I think it really came to a head with Highland Park, and the fact that they were able to ascertain who committed the acts there, and were able to provide that information to other law enforcement departments in order to apprehend that individual very quickly. And so that's the impetus behind it, would be to provide us with additional surveillance for our public art, and primarily to provide greater security for large-scale events in the city, such as 4th of July and Windmill City. And I'll have Chief Mazza also provide additional information if you'd like to.
Yeah, I would just say that this is pretty common at communities around the United States, putting surveillance in public areas for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned. And then I'll also add that it's become more and more common, and I think it'd be smart to add cameras to critical infrastructure points, electric substations, areas where maybe there aren't a lot of people around, but if they fall prey to some sort of an attack, we'd have the ability to go back, at least review the footage and be able to use that to hopefully apprehend the offenders. So this is something it wouldn't be unique to our city. There's cities all around us that are using this surveillance technology. They're using it effectively to deter crime, and then also obviously to apprehend people after the fact.
How many cameras are we talking about?
We have an initial budget of $200,000, and it really depends upon the type of technology that we determine that we're going to use. So it may be something that is an iterative process. How many cameras would we be able to afford for that first $200,000 versus the areas in which we want to install them? And we've seen a lot of neighboring communities do that as well. So do certain key areas with the initial rollout, and then in future years add 2 additional areas.
The reason I ask is, I appreciate the reasoning behind it, but I am also concerned about creating an environment where we've tried to put cameras on every corner in Batavia to survey everything that's happening here. We do have a lot of public art. Graffiti was showing up in very random places in town where I know we would not have a camera out at. And I know we've recently implemented the drone system for larger events like parades, fireworks, other events like that. So in the Highland Park situation, we would have had a drone there, correct?
It would have had to be in the right place to see the individual, though. the cameras have a greater scope that they are able to cover and provide information that can be looked at after the fact. Perhaps Alderman Lancey would speak on that since you have a little bit of expertise in that area.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if anyone wants to dive into the weeds of, the actual capabilities of what the city's talking about doing, I'm more than happy to dive into that. The one thing I'll say is I totally hear everyone's apprehension, right? I'm the last person, as you get to know me, that wants a police state or some type of surveillance state. Definitely don't want that. Just so happens I sell surveillance systems for a living. So yeah, I can definitely, speak to their capabilities. And as we sit today, I'll just let everyone know, it's not CSI, right? So there are capabilities, though, built into these cameras utilizing newer technology. Everyone, loves the buzzword AI or artificial intelligence, but really what it is machine learning within the camera. So basically making the camera smart enough to know what a person is, what a car is, what a bus is, different colors, people wearing hats, carrying bags, certain things. You can then utilize that smarter brain of the camera to then alert. So being less reactive, as Alderman Euro was mentioning, being more proactive. So, to what the chief was saying, use a substation, for instance, right? You can literally set up a perimeter around that and say, anytime a human crosses this line between this time and this time, or any time, I want to be alerted. Right. So, virtual perimeters and things like that, it becomes extremely useful, used in the right ways, which I'm trying to help the city do. And I think we will, if we go through with this, is utilize a system where we are actually using the data, because that is the other true statement that Alderman Euro made is, if no one's watching this or no one's utilizing it, it's useless and we just overpaid. And we're, because you can let your mind run on all the crazy bells and whistles that you can do with CCTVs these days and third-party apps and things like that. But I think I speak, for the, I've been in some meetings that's not what we're looking to do. This is truly for, general surveillance and to basically put permanent eyes in the sky on critical areas and areas where we have massive amounts of people coming here. I think the farmers market is, something that I absolutely want surveillance on every single Saturday that it's there. I mean, it's doing nothing but getting bigger. And like I said, I won't get into the crazy details, being, this being public, but if anyone wants to get into, some of the things that the police would be capable of doing with the system, I would absolutely be more than willing to talk about that in closed session or whatever. But, or if we think that should be public, I can do that too. But, yeah, all that to be said, I wanted to take kind of the edge off it. It's not, this Terminator type, the police are always watching, and if you spit gum on the ground, you're going to get a ticket. That's not the case here. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah. If anyone has any questions as far as the technology goes, I'm more than happy to talk about it.
If the money that we're spending at the wastewater treatment plant doesn't make us want to protect the assets that we have, that to me is one of the big things too, is very easily, and I don't know if this should be public, but very easily somebody could get into, whether it be the wastewater treatment plant, the water plant, any of the utility spots that we have, and that's real money we'd have to spend to fix any of that.
And I'll be completely honest, guys. I mean, I'm flabbergasted. I do this all over the area. We by far have the weakest surveillance system around. No question.
So I guess
Cameras keep birds and animals out of stuff.
Right. We can alert on birds too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's two distinct things, and it could be clearly articulated that I don't have issue with protecting assets. Maybe this sounds bad. Maybe this sounds like I don't care about humans, but the cameras are not going to, they don't deter people from doing things like in Highland Park. It still happened, even though there are cameras there. If we can have something that is going to show that, hey, somebody is trying to take down our power system or something like that, and catch somebody in a criminal act that way, but not be surveilling all Batavians as they go to the farmer's market, because maybe now is not the time that people are saying. I mean, people are definitely saying, "Hey, I don't want you watching what I'm doing," and you see the privacy concerns. I mean, look at all of the social media platforms: Microsoft, Google, Facebook. Everybody is having lawsuits against them because of privacy issues, and the privacy stuff is ratcheting up. And having cameras in public spaces where people are enjoying things could deter people from going to those public spaces is part of it too. Protecting our assets, I get that, and having artificial intelligence that's going to say, oh, yep, somebody crossed the line, just like my Ring camera tells me when somebody's at my front door. That I'm more in favor of, and I'm less in favor of the potential privacy issues that come from a camera in a public space.
I guess the only thing I would say to that is I agree for the most part, but I think you'd be astonished at how many places you go that have cameras that are watching you. So I don't really think people think about it, to be honest. And they become very happy when something does go wrong. And, you know, I just don't want to be the person that says, you know, man, I wish we had that on footage, or
no,
we could have zoomed in on that guy's face.
I know what you're saying, and I'm in a hotel room right now, but as soon as I walk out and I'm on the casino floor, I know I'm on about 100 cameras. So, but I know that, and I expect it in a private business. And, you know, and I expect it if I go to London, where London has cameras all over the place. So right now, I don't expect it as much in the U.S. And maybe sure, there's cities that I would go into and there'd be cameras. And I know if you fire off a gun in downtown Chicago and they have their cameras that'll zoom in on the gunfire and stuff. And fortunately, we're not in that situation. And those have proven to not necessarily be the greatest technology in that circumstance. And I'm not saying that's what we're putting in. But anyway, my position is I'm just not, from a privacy standpoint, I'm not comfortable with them. From a protecting of assets standpoint, I'm more comfortable with them.
Any other questions?
I just would like to add that I think when you go outside, there can be no expectation of privacy. When you're in the public, you have to assume that there is a camera somewhere watching you. And I think that in this world today, most people do expect that. In fact, if you walk down the sidewalk, you're going to be on the ring cams of everybody that lines that sidewalk.
And we're doing this, I mean, the chief alluded to it, I'm doing this all over right now. I mean,
Kane County has a whole network.
Yeah, I do. We're the only town I know of that doesn't have one. Let's put it that way. I mean, I do. I mean, of our size, you know, and our prowess.
That's one of the things I think Kane County IT manages, the camera network that they have, and it's all the county roads and all the intersections.
Yeah.
And they are a huge network.
Yeah, I just did all of Kane County.
And I do believe the lawsuits on the privacy issue relate to name, address, and other personal information, but there were some of photos, but they were not live photos. They were photos like from Facebook or things like that. It wasn't a camera issue. It was information that's on their personal page.
Mm-hmm. Quick question on the Kane County transportation ones. My understanding, or at least it used to be Kane County's policy, that those cameras were only ever to be used for controlling traffic lights, and they were never to be used for anything beyond that. Has that changed?
I'm not sure what their policy is. I just know that I see cameras at almost every intersection that's on a county road.
Yeah, and so I read many years ago that they were never going to use those for anything other than detecting cars waiting at a stoplight.
Yeah, the ones you see on the street, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, the ones you see like above stoplights. Stuff like that. Yep. Emergency vehicles and stuff like that. But then, yeah, all of their governmental buildings and all that, that's all general surveillance, normal.
I just want to say I see both sides of this too, and I was a little hesitant, but then hearing from experts, from what the chief said about what the intent is, and then hearing we're really just kind of getting up to what is more or less a standard practice. It makes sense and seems logical and less of a privacy kind of risk than just general safety.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, I came to Laura and the chief, and I wanted to make sure we weren't getting bamboozled into some kind of, because there are a lot of bells and whistles out there. You can be overwhelmed with cool stuff, but what's going to work? What does the city of Batavia need? That's what we're looking at. So it's not.
Just one more clarifying question. I do see a difference with like a camera facing the Peg Bond Center or, a place where it's a very designated place for a gathering.
That's the intent.
Okay, because it's different for me just to have it like facing down a sidewalk.
Oh, that's
Or because I know
not the
last
intent,
year that
no.
there was a talk to have it over on the bridge, to have cameras over on Wilson Street Bridge. And
Only
we had this
facing the
discussion
artwork.
last year at budget time too about these cameras, but.
Only facing the artwork on the bridge. It wasn't to capture people walking on the bridge.
Because that would be more my concern about privacy issues, but if it's
The large gathering areas that we want to
Specific
have greater
assets,
surveillance
yeah.
of the activities there for public safety reasons.
And the idea too is to have these mostly out of view. It's not like, they're going to be peering down and hanging over buildings all over the place. There's mounting capabilities, painting, and all sorts of ways that you can make these aesthetically pleasing as well. So.
I guess, I came in with a lot more reservations than I do now, so thank you for your comments. And I'm more comfortable now moving forward with them being in the budget so that we can have an in-depth conversation about what $200,000 gets us and what assets we're going to protect and what streets they could or could not be monitoring at that time as well. So I'm at a place where I'm okay with it in the budget now.
A budget is a plan, and not until we bring a contract before you to debate and decide whether we're going to go through with, is it really a final expenditure.
I'll just say, depending on what we end up doing and all that, I would consider that a fairly low number, because you got to remember there's infrastructure and IT involved, and there's more to it than just, it's not your Ring Wi-Fi cameras that we're talking about, right? They're like enterprise grade, stuff that needs to be managed by the IT team and all that. So just keep that in mind.
Just one quick question for Chief before we get off this subject, which we should be moving off. But is there a program in the city to register private cameras so you guys have access to them in case?
Yes. Can you hear me? There is. I think it's through Ring. I don't think Nest has that capability. We're not using Nest, but yes, I think Ring has a neighbors program where you can register your camera with the police department. And really what that does is that just tells us who has cameras. It doesn't give us access to surveillance footage. It just gives us the information of knowing who maybe in a specific area would potentially have surveillance that they could share with us.
Nick, are you referring to like an OEMC type where you can like federate in, and if they say Like if you as a homeowner said, hey, somebody's at my house, you can tap into my system.
No.
Oh, okay.
And not
Or
just
business.
limited to Ring, but business, even downtown, like you know where cameras are, and either a company signs off that says, yeah, you have access to them, or you don't, or you wait till the time of an incident or something, and you go chase them down. But I thought there was a way to register businesses or residents can register, so they have a camera in case you want to. But
it would be a function of Milestone, I believe, Chief. And, and they would have to work through them.
Yeah, I don't think we have that capability. I can tell you now when we're dealing with situations of criminal activity, it's feet on the ground, knocking on doors. Hey, do you have surveillance? Or we're just trying to observe. Looks like they may have cameras. Well, let's check with them.
Okay. We'll learn more as we discuss this.
Yeah, more informal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so was the decision to leave it in the budget and then have a further discussion at the time that, okay.
Didn't we have that in last year's budget, but we never really got.
Yeah, I don't know why it
It's
didn't
in
move
this year's
forward.
budget,
Right,
and it
but we
just
never-
was, it was a project that we just didn't
Didn't
get
get
to.
to, right? And I think that's something that we need to, devote more time to and have more, in-depth discussion about, so we all feel comfortable with whatever we decide to do.
And I think the other thing that came to mind when we were talking about the public art on the bridge is, we spent $30,000 on each sculpture. It wasn't a tremendous amount of money, so you might want to look at a cost-benefit analysis. Would it be cheaper in the long run just to replace that art or repair it rather than monitor it? Just something to think about when you get to that point.
I have to have multiple reasons before I'm ready to say yes to it. Not just to protect, what's there.
Okay.
I would second Mark's. I don't know what the process would be, but I do have concerns about the IT labor after just hiring two people, throwing a third person on there. So I'd like that to be brought up for further discussion.
It's actually, Howard is going to have that on the November 14th committee, the whole meeting. Mark was just saying he wasn't able to be here for that meeting, but we already had intended to put that on the agenda for a discussion, and based on the result of that discussion, whether it is in or out of the budget at that point.
Right, we will have the public hearing on the budget next week, and we can have another discussion on budgetary items after you've had more time to go through the document, because there's a lot to look at. You may have more questions at that point. So there would be no final action on the budget until planned passage is December 4th. All right, so we'll leave that in and then go back to the TIF.
Okay, so what we did was provide a list of potential projects that we could utilize TIF1 funds for. There are a couple in there that I know that we have heard questions back about and comments back about with regard to public restrooms. Public restrooms are something that have come up from our Main Street organization, sees the need for those to promote more visitors and their comfort in remaining in our downtown. Yes, of course, the restrooms here at City Hall are available, and that's 24 hours a day. But this would offer, additional restrooms when there's festivals, when there's races, all of those types of things. There are two different projects that it's, either or none. We've got a west side potential for public restrooms, and that was a project that has been just discussed informally with the staff of the Park District, although I think that they have also had discussions with their board about it. It would be if the city utilized TIF funds to build those west side restrooms, then the Park District would then take that project over. They would own the building, they would maintain the building, so the city would not have any ongoing expense or responsibility for those public restrooms.
We put it out here on Park District property.
We could put it out there on Park District property, or if we wanted it not to be so visible in that vista, we could also put it on the other side of the street. That land is owned by McDonald's, but it is, kind of an underutilized parkway that's located right there, and would make it a little bit less visible, but still a very useful area to have them. In conjunction with that, the Park District has made a couple of requests for additional uses for the TIF funds, and that would be to repair the fountain. They have ongoing expenses of about $15,000 per year that they spend trying to MacGyver fixes for that fountain, which of course all of the parts are no longer in production, no longer supported by manufacturers. They have to go to machine shops to get parts made in order to keep the fountain running. And so it needs a $500,000 overhaul is what they are telling us. And certainly the city has no obligation to assist the Park District with that. But, in light of the fact that TIF is a collaborative effort amongst the taxing bodies to say that we'll hold the increment steady so that the funding that comes from the increments can be used to the benefit of encouraging development and addressing infrastructure. I think that, this may fall within that spirit, and it certainly is a central feature of our downtown, and I would hate to see it someday, not have water in it and be sitting there as a statue and not a working fountain. The other thing that the Park District has requested assistance with is the wall that is along the east side bike trail that is cantilevered over the river that's behind the Pal Joey's property. That really needs repairing. There's some dispute as to who owns which part of the wall. It borders the neighboring private properties there, but also it divides the private properties from the bike path, which is owned by the Park District. And so they also requested assistance with fixing that wall, which again is an infrastructure that is a reflection of all of us. When people are riding by on their bikes, they don't think of that wall as a Park District wall. It's just a reflection of the city of Batavia. So that is another project. Another potential project would be converting the old tin shop building we could put public restrooms on the east side. That would make those restrooms accessible to our farmers market every weekend, where there really is no close by public restroom for individuals to use. We could design it in a way that offered a first floor small retail space that maybe could be used as further incubator space for maybe a graduate of our boardwalk shops. I guess I call them graduates when they move into brick and mortar in our downtown. But then the second floor could be converted to perhaps a unit or two of affordable housing. And so that would be a potential project. And what we have in here is the architectural expenses associated with that is what we think that we would be able to accomplish in 2024. Also listed under the infrastructure construction is riverbank stabilization. So utilizing some of this funding to do riverbank stabilization. In our budget is the riverbank stabilization that is behind the Sturdy Shelter Brewing. However, it would be, a very impactful, both from an environmental standpoint and also aesthetically, to do riverbank stabilization along the Larson Becker parking lot that is across the way. And, I can't even put a price tag on that, because you could do basic riverbank stabilization, or you could do something where you're actually creating maybe seating areas, stone seating areas that allow people to, a greater utilization of that space by the public. The North River Street catenary lighting is $500,000 because rather than attach that catenary lighting to private structures, we're going to have to install our own poles in order to hang that lighting. I don't know if it's going to be that expensive. I don't know if it's going to be more expensive than that. It's only in its design phase right now. We've got some parking, I'm sorry, let me scroll down here. The Newspaper Boy Alley Arch. I've been in contact with both property owners to attach to their buildings that arch. And at this point, they seem amenable, but they would like to see the agreement and they would like to see what that arch looks like. So we have talked to the landscape architect who did the prior designs, and they are updating those for an arch that would attach to the two buildings. We could also utilize the funds in TIF number 1 to supplement Prairie Street and Wilson intersection, since we know that there is a shortfall there that we, in all likelihood, would have to cover with debt. That particular project is in TIF number 1, so we could utilize the funding for that. We're making parking lot improvements at River and State. Not only, we did some of that work this year, but we also need to rebuild a staircase that exists between that parking deck and the upper deck. And if we don't see, we don't have a development project on the horizon, that upper parking lot also is in need of being redone. Got the fountain rehab, public restroom, repayment of the general fund loan is what Peggy had brought up earlier. The North River Street one-way, we still anticipate in 2024 that there will be $20,000 of additional work that we need to do to complete that project. So I look for your comments on which of those projects we could do, because we do only have $2.4 million, right?
No, there is,
3.4?
everything we have here brings the balance, projected balance to zero. The only thing that I was wondering on clarification, because you mentioned the tin shop had 55,000. It was my understanding that's because there isn't enough funding to do the whole project, but should one of the others be canceled, then it would go towards that, because everything in TIF 1 has to be constructed in 2024.
Right.
So we couldn't do just the engineering next year and then, I mean, if we could, but then we would have to fund it with general fund money the following year.
Right.
You can share money between TIFs if it's an existing TIF, but once that TIF expires, you can't share money with that area any longer.
Just to clarify,
My thought would be is-
the tin shop is in TIF 6, actually. So.
Oh, the tin shop is in TIF 6? Okay.
So we can share it for the engineering this year, and then if we wanted to, the 663 that's getting repaid to general fund would be where we'd come up with the money.
Well, actually, TIF 6 is our last TIF that we passed, so it will be there for a long time. There is no increment there, but it is contiguous. Yeah, I should mention, when you share with TIFs, they have to be contiguous, and it would be contiguous with TIF 3, so you could use TIF 3 funds to do that,
the work.
The second phase of that project, if you wanted to do both projects. Or you could still do that and then shift money from one of the other projects more towards the Prairie and Wilson intersection, or towards more riverbank stabilization. The project you mentioned, Laura, for in front of Larson Becker, that is TIF 1, correct, Scott?
West side? Yeah, it's TIF 1, yes.
Yes, so that would have to be designed and constructed next year. So if that was the direction, I think that Rahat would need to know very quickly so that he could get going on that.
In the past, when we had discussions regarding the stairs and a solution for the stairs, the city council decided that since that was Park District property, that we would perhaps wait until there was a development project and/or that the Park District would come up with a solution for that. I'm not sure if the sentiment is the same at this point.
The only thing I would be concerned about is if we do something over there and then that area changes when it's up to be developed. Did we spend money that's just going to be there for 2 years or 3 years before it gets redone? So I'd be kind of hesitant how far I would go into what I would design there or what I would do for riverbank stabilization on that side. Plus, I really don't think that that's eroded the way the other stuff is downtown, just from my own observation out there. And
Hey, y'all, I got to drop off.
Yeah.
So,
I saw your hand up.
yeah. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
So I'm looking at the public restroom thing, and that's an estimate for a standalone building.
Yeah,
And
the
And what we would
750,000.
need there to have the sanitary sewer from it. Is there any other place along there? I'm thinking of the building that's right next to the fountain. If that
Yes.
building could be changed or expanded, is there a sanitary sewer there that could be accessed so we would try to keep the cost down? If we're only having to make a 20 or a 40-foot run to it rather than, I don't know where the sewer mains are out there and how much work you'd have to do if we were to locate it on a piece of private property.
That's the same sewer we would connect to even if we built it across the street
Right,
at
it would
McDonald's. The sewer construction cost is not the large percentage of that cost. The big percentage of that cost is the building.
Building,
So
okay.
you're not going to save much.
Right, okay. I'm just trying to think of how to hide it.
Right. Well, as Laura said, and I mean, if you plop the restrooms right there, you may actually put it right in the middle of the vista.
Yeah.
That's the concern.
What about the Park District who's building that community center right there? Is that going to have public bathrooms in it?
I don't know what the hours of operation will be for that building, so yeah, it may.
Peg Pond has bathrooms in it. Could we just add on to that? Like an hour section?
I don't know if there's an opportunity to add on to the outer section, but I have been asked by other entities why the Park District doesn't just open that up. And it's because the way that it is designed has lent itself to be vandalized over and over again. And they finally closed it to the public because of that. And there's, if you go to the style that we had in mind in order to do the cost estimate was the public restrooms at Mount Mary's Park in St. Charles. And if you go in there, you can see how they've made it fairly indestructible and, able to be cleaned by bringing in a power hose and sending anything down the drain, which is the type of design that we would hope to have here. The one in the Peg Bond Center is more like what we have here at City Hall.
Yes.
So I'm just looking at this number and, it's pushing $1 million for a standalone cement block bathroom, which, there's one over on the east side where the skate park is. It's not open year round. So the Park District is saying they want to maintain it, but they have multiple other public restrooms in town that are not open year round for public use. And they are literally a cinder block with a toilet in it. So
that's not what's being proposed. I just want to make sure that you know that the building at Mount St. Mary's Park is beautiful. I mean, it really is aesthetically, it fits in with the style of building that's in the area very well. It doesn't resemble a cinder block building at all.
And I had the same question as Dustin. Would it be more cost effective to kind of refurbish either the PEG bond or their newly purchased building, and create public bathrooms that are accessible and mostly vandal-proof with security cameras, since that's where we're going with this. I am full support. We do need more public restrooms in downtown on both sides of town, absolutely. I'm just wondering if this is really the best option with the many buildings that the Park District has on that block. They have 3 different buildings in the exact same vicinity that we're talking about.
I just think that the way that they have in mind that they're designing those buildings is not for public access when no Park District employees are present. And that would be similar to City Hall as well, because we have 24 hours. We've got someone who's looking at who's going in and out of our public restrooms. So this would be a public restroom that doesn't have any supervision.
And spending many summers training for marathons, I know where every public restroom is along the Fox Valley River. And what Alderman Lehman suggested, with the Park District building, the rec center, if there could be restrooms attached to that have exterior access so that you are not, putting yourself at risk of vandalism, that would be a possible option. Then it's attached to another structure instead of a standalone structure.
Is that something that you're suggesting that we would utilize the TIF 1 funds for, or would you just be suggesting to the Park District that they invest in that?
Well, they've already said if we put them out there that they would take over the maintenance of them, correct?
Yes.
So if we were to contribute towards, like you say, building them on the outside of that building, with insight could be added to the kiosks downtown for information for people where they are. And if you were to add it on the outside of the building, it could be built with the same brick that's there and utilize that. And then they would have it within one of their structures for maintenance. That might be an option to discuss with them.
And it's more cost effective.
Yeah, if that's more cost effective to contribute to that and have truly an externally accessed washroom, maybe with an internal steel deadbolted door that they can access from the inside to clean them.
And with the requirement that it is open year round.
Yeah, and that would be something that we'd have to.
Required that it has to be open year round.
Yeah, but because I think that's the goal that we're looking for, is to have that available, because that is something that's important. The time that I've spent over this summer, not being super mobile, sitting over next to the farmer's market, that's a question 50 times every Saturday morning. Where's the public restrooms?
Over the footbridge.
I would say,
and some people won't use a porta potty that's there, and it's direct them over here and tell them they come into City Hall and use it.
not only do I sell cameras, but I do other things in the construction industry as well. And I would just maybe put out some caution that if, you bring this to the designer and the contractor, or whoever that is doing this, this facility, my brain's not working, whatever the facility is. It might be way more expensive than just building a standalone place, because they try and make up for lost money made, and you know what I mean? So if you don't pay close attention to it, they're like, yeah, we'll throw it on there, no problem.
If it was the school district and it was lamp construction, I wouldn't even consider this. But it's the Park District, and we are going to have to work with them on a lot of projects in town. So it might be an opportunity. If it's not, and it's $1.5 million to do something there, then we know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, I just, it crossed my brain when we started talking about adding it onto the building, thinking that, okay, there's already a construction process going on. If we interrupt that process with the parties already involved, then that could be more expensive than just doing it.
And I'm even thinking, okay, if this doesn't happen for a year or two, that we don't get to this, is that coincide with the time if the study shows that the police department moves, we have an opportunity through the door right there, add 2 more bathrooms.
And that would be after the TIF ends. So
Right,
that-
and
we
I
were just
get
putting
that.
it in here to try to utilize these funds.
What about something like this? They're all over Europe.
Very small scale.
This isn't Europe, so.
Hey, you know what? They look nice.
TARDIS.
No, I'm with
Restrooms in
you.
Europe.
They look nice.
I'm with you.
You know, you can scan your debit card, you gotta pay to get in, so if you really gotta go, you go, you know?
Well, I
You seen the ones that look like all mirrors too?
right on the other side of the plaza right here, the corner that we don't have anything at.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, this is not $750,000.
No.
And I think it looks perfectly fine.
That's more or less.
Way less than
We
some.
could have one that looks like a little
If someone
tiny, a little
charges
tiny depot.
750 G's to put that in, I mean,
Windmill.
I'm in the wrong business.
Yeah, this is like super cheap.
Yeah, I mean, no bathroom in my mind, unless we just have to bring all new infrastructure out there. That's
Laura.
a different story.
Yes, the number you have, wasn't that what it cost the city of St. Charles to do that?
Yeah.
There's one up
So
there.
that was based on actual
And that's
cost.
So
men
field trip
and
to go use
women's
the
and
bathroom, see
family.
if it's like-
So it's actually 3 restrooms. So, you know, a whole.
2 years ago. 2 or 3.
2 years?
I mean, I get it, but it's like,
Field trip.
I'd have to see where the cost is there. If it's in the infrastructure, I can understand that, because sometimes that gets out of control, but to just have a $1.2 million bathroom, you think about the homes you can build for that, it's like, what? So it's obviously raises some eyebrows for a reason, but
Honestly, I'd rather spend the money on the tin shed over there and reuse that building, even if it's only for 5 or 10 years. Put an apartment or 2 in it up top, if it's structurally feasible, I don't know that. And then have public restrooms in it.
Agreed, because I think we need
And that's
them
located.
more on the east side right now than on the west side, because most of the time when there's an event going down here, people can use City Hall. And if it's a much larger event, we already have to bring in porta potties because there's so many people here.
Can I make a suggestion then that we just sort of shift this line item and public restrooms refer to an investment east side public restrooms? And that, Gary, does that seem like a project that we would be able to do in 2024?
It sounds like we could even extend that a little longer if it's in TIF 3. So
Right.
Can we take money from TIF 1 and loan it to TIF 3 to use for that project later on? Or move it there now?
You could port money from one TIF to another.
If you have an actual planned project.
So are there projects coming up out of?
You can't just transfer the balance to another TIF and say, well, we're going to use it for, you would
Are
need
there
to
any
have a
projects that are in
project that was
the
ready to go.
adjacent TIF over there that we could fund out of 1 instead of using the money from that TIF?
Well, I was thinking of something else that we could do if we put it towards Prairie and Wilson Street intersection, and then take the money that we were going to transfer from the general fund to the Prairie and Wilson Street intersection and reduce it by that amount, then that can make it general fund money that we can set aside and designate for future public restrooms when you're ready.
That's why she's the finance director.
Magical shell.
I knew there was a way to move it around.
It is kind of like a shell game, but it's legal.
That's right. And it's the right way to do it, so that way we don't get somebody coming in here in a year and saying, you can't do that with that money.
Right. So we would be using it for the Prairie and Wilson Street, and then the money, the general fund money that we were going to use towards it, we could set aside. And then if later you decide you don't want to do it, we could just release those funds because it's general fund money, so there would be no obligation to spend it on restrooms if you decided you didn't want to.
Because I think I would feel better about that if we were using that money to put forth towards something for especially the workforce housing. To have something in that area that would provide that, I think would be really good.
I've been hoping for something in that tin shed the past 10 years. I think that would bring such an increment, a great development moment for that strip right there, that's my priority of all that entire list.
I wholeheartedly agree. That was my favorite idea. I get very excited about public bathrooms because use them all the time. But that tin shop idea is really cool, and that's very exciting.
So then if you could just direct me on how much money it is you would like to set aside and put towards the public restrooms.
I think the idea is to move the 750.
750?
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Because we're going to have to do the build out of the whole building.
And if we have to do any
yeah,
parking
it
lot
likely will
improvement
cost
next to
more
it
than
or
that.
anything else, that would be good. And, you know, if we had to move the Main Street building to somewhere else to facilitate that, to utilize more of the parking spaces there, I think that would be the smart thing to do.
Okay, so the direction would be to remove the line item for public restrooms here, put it into the Prairie and Wilson Street intersection, and then set up the 750,000 as a designated line item for downtown public restroom.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm just looking, it was Kluber who did that St. Charles, and that's only 1,000 square feet for 750 grand.
That's a lot per square foot, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't look that impressive to me. It just looks like a.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait till you see the inside.
Even if you tile it from floor to ceiling, I still can't see spending that.
So the other thing was the fountain expense. Let's discuss that. Is that something that the city would like to?
I was actually going to ask, is that $500,000 estimation the entirety of the rehab?
Yes,
So that's Park District not putting up any,
that's correct.
and we're
I
taking
just
on the
asked
entire
them what-
responsibility.
Yeah. I just
Gotcha.
asked them to provide me with what's the
Idea.
total
Sure.
of the, and we can determine, we don't have to give them 100% of it. We could.
Right, I'd really want to see a plan, so if we want to leave that in the budget there, out of the TIF, to do it. The reason I say that is because for the past 21 years, the Park District hasn't gotten any of the increment from the TIF. They're not like the school district where the state legislature allows them to get some of it. They've gotten none of the increment increase out of TIF 1. So if you were to go back and try to figure that out, it'd probably be somewhere north of that over that time period. So if we were to do that, and you know, the mayor goes on and on about it all the time, how many people like to use that shot downtown, I'd like to see us keep it. But I also don't know that I'd agree to just write them a check for 500 grand and let them work on that.
I like the fountain too, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I want to see a plan before I know what's going on out there. I mean, that sounds crazy.
Are there other options for what you could, if we look at something other than a fountain, like some sort of this big landscape situation with the space?
No.
Okay.
What would you like to do with the budgeted amount here? Would you like to leave it where it is as a placeholder and then have the Park District come back and articulate exactly, you know, how that $500,000 gets spent?
If we got to the end of the year next year and we didn't do anything with the Park District with that money, can we transfer that to the general fund as our loan repayment?
We
Increase the
already
loan
have it.
repayment amount from,
We already have the loan repayment budgeted in there.
Yeah.
okay, but we couldn't do that out of the TIF at the end of the year if there was money left as the repayment? Because I don't, is the
Well,
660?
we're already planning on that repayment. So
Right.
the
Is that the
500,000 is in
total?
addition to that.
Right, but is the 663 the total of the loan repayment?
Yes.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any loan repayment, it wouldn't.
No, because, well, it's budgeted in there for next year for spending the total of the reserves that are remaining.
Prairie and Wilson, more than 750? Can we do 1.25? Right, 2.8. Can we do the same thing, 1.25?
Let me bring that up.
I think it's like, isn't it over $4 million, the intersection improvement? Our cost on it?
No, I think in the street fund, it was 2.7, and that was before the, we don't have to use all of the Rebuild Illinois funds.
Okay.
If Rahat thinks that he could spend on design before July 2025. That's something we probably need to discuss internally to figure out what those projects are, but
It's some of those timeline depends on IDOT. I mean, they are taking longer than what we anticipate. So I can commit here that we will move as fast as we can, but not necessarily all that we can spend by 2025. Again, it depends on IDOT.
So it's 2.8 for construction and 478 for engineering, but we have a $138,000 grant for part of that. And then the TIF contribution
It was already 400.
is already in there for 400. So we were going to add 750 to that. So that puts us right where there's probably not much room left there. The other option, we haven't planned on doing additional riverbank stabilization, but that was something we had talked about that needs to be done. It wouldn't have anything offsetting to it, and needs to be time to plan the engineering and get that done.
So the council approved the engineering, so we should be able to get the engineering completed by March of next year.
Right, for behind sturdy shelter, but if they didn't want to do...
No, we are designing that part too, in front of the Larson Becker too.
Oh, you're doing the design on Larson.
We were going to do all the design
already.
work, even if we weren't going to do
And
all
so
the-
that you'll have it when you're ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
There
I do
is
remember now. You
another project which I'll throw out there, which no one's really talked about because we've all forgotten about it, but the pipe that goes under the Pal Joey's building, which is the whole storm sewer from the east side, I mean, that outfall could be installed as well. That was going to go in right by the Peace Bridge there, right as part of the stabilization project. So the stabilization project could grow in scope to include that work as well.
Do we want to take that money that's in there for the fountain, cut it in half, and spend that on riverbank stabilization? Leah?
Question. The boardwalk shops, which TIF district are those in?
I think those are 6, yes.
That's currently kind of dormant. There's nothing happening there.
Not
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, there are TIF maps too on the city's website where you can go and look and see what properties they're in.
So proposed changes beyond the 750 moving to general fund so that then we can use
I guess
Barry and Wilson and...
the thing I think about is if we can't use this money for something else and we leave it in there as a line item for the fountain rehab, then, I feel like if we moved half of that over into riverbank stabilization, we'd get more of that done. And I know that that's nowhere near the end of what we need to do, but it's a bigger part or bigger start to that. Sarah?
That seems reasonable.
Because again, I don't know that I want to, like I said, I don't know that I want to write a check of $500,000 to the park district and let them spend it on that. If they came back and they said that this is, a $300,000 project that they can't afford to do, then I also want to know how they're going to be able to maintain it after we throw that kind of money at it. Because that's got to be part of the plan.
They currently do have $15,000 in their operating budget, which hopefully after the rehab, it would need $15,000 of. So I think that the ongoing cost is there. We also, because we've been talking with them about collaborating on some work on Mahoney Creek that happens to run across their property, they have told us that their capital expenditures are spoken for the next 5 years between the 150 Houston project and then also the work on Clark Island associated with the $600,000 OSLAD grant that they received, and then also work on the Elfstrom Greenway.
If they didn't receive any funding, what did they say they would do with the mountain
continue to spend $15,000 on it per year and hope that that would be enough to keep it going as it is.
So the issue is that the motor works and all of that need rehabilitation, but it still might work? I'm imagining, though, that they need $15,000 worth of chemicals for operation, because, I mean, you do have to put...
Fountains are not cheap.
No,
They're not.
Yeah.
That's why
Not
I
cheap
want
to
to see
build,
a
not cheap to
plan.
maintain.
Before we commit anything to it.
That's my concern, is we'd put $500,000 into it, that in 5 years.
Here's one of the things that we could do is articulate $500,000 less of expense than we anticipate there being in TIF number 1, and then say to the Park District that we need to have further discussions about the fountain. And then at any point, we can decide what our commitment is. Does that sound appropriate, Peggy?
Were you saying just make it the budget 500,000 less, or just call it other for now?
Let's call it other for now.
But I guess the question would be, what would you, if you want to make it riverbank stabilization, how soon would you need to know, Rahat?
I mean, if the money is in... I mean, we will have the design completed in March and go out for bid in April.
So there's some time, I guess.
I think.
Right, and I think if the scope is whether it's $200,000 or $700,000, I think we could still get a contractor to agree to do it if we have a plan set up to go.
Right.
And, you know, I don't think we would regret spending that money out of the TIF on riverbank stabilization, no matter where we did it.
Yeah, the plan is to design both sides and go and bid both sides as an alternate, and the council will have the option to either give only the behind the study shelter or give both. You know, so you'll have option.
So when TIF 1 ends, the Park District's going to have a large inflow of cash going forward, right, from what is currently being diverted. Won't that help cover the fountain?
I will give the same answer as we hear from our school district. They've known that for many years, and it has already been dedicated to existing or planned expenses.
I don't think they would have bought that property at 150 Houston. I don't think they would have bought that if they didn't know that they were getting X number of dollars in 25 after the TIF expired.
And the amount that they will receive the increment is $1 million, but that's going to be split between all the taxing bodies. With the school district getting
more is going to go to the school district.
68% of it goes to the school district. Right. Just like the little dollar chart. That's who gets what. But it is something different. I mean, even if it's just enough for them to maintain the building.
$75,000 a year, I think, is what they're going to get.
That's enough. Turn the lights on and pay for utilities in that building.
Sure. Okay, so then I will just change the description on that to other at this time, because you haven't made a decision on how that 500,000 will be.
Right. And if we decide to split that between the Prairie Street intersection and riverbank stabilization, depending on what the dollar amounts came back.
I'll go back through and make the calculations.
We could still move that around to spend that however we wanted, as long as we spend it by the end of the year.
Right.
Remember, there's the additional request about helping with the retaining wall along the cantilevered part of the bike path on the east side as well.
Well,
so
I think
that could fall under other as well.
And that whole section has to be redesigned because it's a foot underwater every time high water comes through there. I mean, it's unusable for, a month or two a year. So at some point that has to get changed.
Integrate kind of the adjacent properties as well to almost make that, more.
Your microphone.
Yeah, I have to use.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I also feel like that bike path could integrate better with the adjacent properties rather than they're very segregated off from each other right now, which, it depends on the property owners whether they want that or not, but it seems like that could be a nice promenade rather than just kind of
it's a timing issue.
Yeah.
Parts of it look like it it's ready to fail.
Right, yeah.
And there's no developer in sights with the proposed project.
And I think
And just from a scoping standpoint, rebuilding of that so that it no longer floods and creating a promenade, you went from now a $500,000 project to a $5 million project.
Right. I just meant more foundational, but yeah.
No, I agree with all of that, that it lends itself to, it needs a complete redevelopment.
And is the property still for sale over there, that section of that block?
I believe it is.
Still listed. So pretty much everything from Newsboy Alley North is listed for sale.
And
No dollar amount on that wall fix, was there?
No idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
one other thing to mention too is we talked about portability between existing TIFs.
Right.
Next year, we could utilize funds that are in TIF 3 towards these projects, should you decide that you wanted to do that as well. However, that would reduce the amount available for future projects in TIF 3. Just depends on what the priority is.
I do think that the Harris properties are in TIF 1, though. Am I right? Yeah, they're in TIF 1, so they're TIF
Right. It would have to occur next year.
Yes. Okay, so I think unless anybody would like to make any other changes to the TIF 1 budget, I think that we've got direction there. Thank you very much.
And if anybody else has any questions over the next week, make sure to get them to Peggy so that we get them asked and answered and onto the website, and so we all know what the questions are.
We kind of cut it off, though, for questions from anyone else this evening. Are there any more? Okay, well, all right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Jen.
Good night. Did that email go out to everybody with COVID?
Yeah, just to you.